Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the Hot Comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the Hot Comics from November 25th, 2022, and I'm recording this early in the week. I'm actually recording this on Monday, May 22nd, 2023. So there's potential things could change between now and when this posts on Saturday. I don't normally record it this week or this early in the week, but this week I had to. So we're recording this a little bit early, but yet, as always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. Only we're not this week. So CBSI, this was Thanksgiving week. CBSI for the last several years has usually put out like a special list or something around Thanksgiving and not put out a regular list. This year they didn't even do that. They didn't put out any list around Thanksgiving, but Tom and Key Collector did. So we're actually just looking back at the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. So we only got 10 books to talk about. As always, though, we're still looking back to see what factors made these books hot back then, what has happened since, and how have they performed in the market since, so we all make better decisions about what books we chase in the moment and what books we're just patient on. So, without further ado, let's talk about these 10 books. This will be a little bit shorter video than normal, but let's see what we can learn. First up, we have Saban's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers #2, the first appearance of the Green Ranger, and this hit the list because of the passing of Jason David Frank, the Green Ranger, obviously, and so everybody was kind of chasing this book because of that. Back then, raw copies jumped up to averaging $30, and 9.8 was hitting 200. And as always is the case, doesn't matter really who it is. When we have somebody pass, there's a big buzz around the book, and then they fall back because people just stop thinking about them, and it doesn't sustain the values long term. This has been a constant occurrence. Now raw copies are $1 to $15. 9.8. There's only been 2 recent sales, 100 and 150. So this one turned into a bit of a trap. It really just kind of returned to where it belongs in terms of what it's usually going for. So yeah. We lost somebody. There's a lot of interest around that event, and then it fades. It doesn't really matter who that person is. Next, we have 2 books that are kind of has to do with show. Well, one with the show coming, and then the next one is with the show ending. First up, we have the show coming, and that is Escape from New York #1, the first comic and appearance of Snake Plissken. And so this was based on rumors that they're rebooting the movie series. We'll see into a TV series, rebooting the movie into a TV series. I can talk, swear. We will see if that actually happens, but that was the rumor back then, caused this book to jump to a $10 to $25 book raw. Now it's a $5 to $15 book raw, so definitely down. Borderline, you could call this also a trap. I'm going to call it an I'll be back, because most of the sales are kind of the 10 to 15-ish side of the 5 to 15, but yeah, definitely down and an I'll be back on this one, and a book that had been worth being patient on. We'll see if this ever happens. Have doubts that it happens anytime soon. Then we have the show that was ending, and this is Walking Dead #193. The show was coming to an end, so there was an interest in the last issue of the comic. The final issue kind of jumped up to raw copies were averaging $9, which is not, double cover, basically. 9.8 was up to 80. Again, not very high. I just put kind of I'll be back on this, but now raw copies are 2 to 15, with most of the sales like 2 to 5, but a few sales still 10-ish, 15-ish. 9.8, $20 to $40, and there's a lot of 9.8 sales in that 20 plus shipping to 40 plus shipping range. There was one sale for 75, but it's definitely an outlier. So based on mainly the 9.8s, because there's several of those, I'm going to call this a trap. And you could even argue even on the raw side, as most of the sales are kind of under $5, but definitely a trap on that 9.8 side. So yeah, this book is backed up. The show ended. I think they're still doing the Fear of Walking Dead, but yeah, nothing much is going on there at the moment. All right, next we're going to move into our only cover this week. It is Amazing Spider-Man #1, the M&M variant. This was the one that was limited to 5,000. It was only available on his website, and you could also get it signed, basically, Raw copies back then, unsigned, were going for 140. Signed copies were going for 1,700. And my prediction was, that's probably a trap. With 5,000 printed, that's probably a trap on the raw unsigned, but the signed are probably going to be worth it. And I was completely wrong. Now raw copies unsigned are going $200 to $300. 9.8s of those are $650 to $1,000. Those are up at straight cash for an unsigned copy of this. The signed copies, unslabbed, or there's been no slab versions signed sales recently, are only going for around $1,000 to $1,200, a little over $1,000. So yeah, the signed actually kind of turned into the trap, whereas the raw without a signature turned into straight cash. So what I know, I guess. So there you go. I really thought with 5,000 that wouldn't be the case, but that is exactly what happened. Next, we have a book on the list for the second week in a row. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 4, the first appearance of Silk. So still based on the announcement that the show was coming to Amazon Prime internationally, but MGM Plus in America, which, good grief, do we need more streaming services? But anyway, back then, I remember that Tom posted this as the raw sales were average sales of $180. That's because there were so many slab sales. The actual raw sales here were $75 to $125 back then. 9.8 was going for $200 to $250. Now $80 to $100 on the raw side, so kind of a steady I'll be back on that side. 9.8, $175 to $225. A little bit of overlap on the lower end there, so this is an I'll be back. These prices were actually a little bit down from the prices they were saying the week before, so it already kind of backed up a little bit, even in a week, and then which caused us just to be kind of a steady and I'll be back instead of a down and an I'll be back that we talked about last week. Next, everything else, the rest of the list is all MCU related. No surprise there. Tom's lists usually are pretty MCU dominated. We have Astonishing X-Men number 9, the first appearance of Danger. And this is spec related to Deadpool 3. Basically, Ryan is reading that comic in the teaser that he put out for Deadpool 3, so that's why people were specking on Danger as maybe a villain for this. Back then, it cost raw copies only to jump, or just a big increase in sales. They were only going $8. 9.8s were only doing $40. So it wasn't really, a huge value here, but there was a bunch of sales. Still a $1 to $15 book. 9.8, $55 to $100, so kind of up a little bit, which is no surprise now that people are kind of aware of this book. So ended up being kind of steady and worth it. You could argue up, but at least on the 9.8 side, but there's not very many of those sales, so we'll stick with steady and worth it on this one. Next, we have Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man number 9, first appearance of White Tiger, Hector Ayala, in a standard comic. So this is the first time he appears in a regular comic and not a magazine-sized book. Raw copies back then were going for $45, 9.8 hitting $380. And this was speculation that we were going to get White Tiger, but most people think it's going to be, I don't know if she's his daughter or his niece, I forget, Ava Ayala, I don't know how you say the last name, but anyway, that she was going to be the version we were going to get, but people were still spicking on this book. So like I said, $45 for raws, 9.8, $380. Now it's a $10 to $35 book for raw copy, $285 to $315 for a 9.8. So we still just barely falls into the trap range as opposed to the I'll be back, particularly on the raw side. So yeah, definitely a bit of a trap. Not likely to be the version of White Tiger we get, but we will see. Next, we have White Tiger number 1 from 2007 on the list for the second week in a row. And this is the first appearance of Angela Del Toro as White Tiger. So I think she's actually like the 4th White Tiger. But most people still... So this book was jumping on the list as people were specking maybe because the casting was Jenna Ortega that people were specking at. I don't know if that's even true or not. But anyway, so that's what people were guessing, which means... People were saying, well, would it be Ava? Would it be this version? People weren't sure, so people were buying this. Raw copies back then, 10 to 30, 9.8, $300. Pretty much the same price as we talked about last week. Now it's a $12 to $50 book on a raw copy, so it's kind of covering that whole range with a little bit higher. 9.8s though, 150 to 200, so we're going to call this kind of a steady I'll be back. You'd be better off being patient on the 9.8s, but raw copies, you really did okay if you were in it back then. All right, 2 books left. First up, we have Avengers number 69 from 1969. First appearance of the Squadron Sinister, and the first Hyperion. And this was rumors that we were going to get Hyperion. Personally, I don't need another evil Superman version on the screen, but oh well. Back then, raw copies were averaging 50 to 150, or we're going 50 to 150. This is another one where Tom had an average of $250 for this book, but had to be included slabs as well. 8.0 was going for 210. So yeah, this is a book that was, doing pretty well. Now it's a $20 to $100 book on the 9.8 or on the raw side. 8.0 down to 162, so this is a down and I'll be back. Every grade is kind of just shifted down a little bit. Borderline trap on this one, I could have called it, but we'll stick with I'll be back just because of how much of the range overlaps on the raw side. And then last but not least, this week we have Sentry number 1 from 2000, the first appearance of Sentry. So this is the other, so there's basically, the Hyperion rumors were basically some sort of Superman type character from Marvel. So the other version of that would be Sentry, besides Hyperion. Raw copies back then were going for 100. 9.8 was going for 350. And now it's a $50 to $100 book for a raw copy, but $350 to $400 for 9.8. So we're going to steady and worth it on this one because there is a lot of 9.8 sales. And 9.8s are pretty tough to get in this book. But yeah, we're going to stick with steady and worth it on this one. So that is this week's list. Interestingly enough, we had 1 up, 4 steady. So half the list either pretty much held or went up. So we only had 5 books down. But yeah, so a pretty good week performance-wise compared to most weeks that we've had. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.